Welcome back to Behind the Grind. Today we have a very special guest, former Kings play-by-play announcer Grant Napear, one of the most recognizable voices in NBA history. Now, Grant, how did you start off sports announcing at Bowling Green?
Well, I grew up outside of New York on Long Island, and I always used to listen to Marv Albert do the Rangers and the Knicks games. And I kind of knew at an early age, probably like in fifth grade, that I wanted to go into broadcasting. And I used to practice all the time in junior high school and high school. And when I went to Bowling Green, my first few weeks on campus, I went into the campus radio station, and I started working on the campus radio station. And that's really when I got my first on-air experience. It was great for me to finally be at a radio station, even though I had been practicing, for 6, 7, 8 years on my own. But that's where I really got my first start on the air was at Bowling Green. And I was very fortunate that, I was able to do some basketball, some hockey, some football. So it was really a great experience for me.
And growing up, was basketball your favorite sport? Because you're most known for your basketball commentating, and I know you played lacrosse. Did you have like a favorite sport growing up, or was it just kind of a mix of all of them?
My favorite sport was actually football. My family had season tickets to both the New York Jets and the New York Giants, and I grew up at an NFL game every single week. And I loved the Knicks. When I was a kid, they were one of the best teams in basketball. They won 2 championships. I used to love going to the Rangers games, but I got to tell you, probably the NFL when I was a kid was my favorite sport, just because I was always at NFL games. I mean, literally every single week I was at either the Jets or the Giants game growing up. So, but I loved all sports. I mean, I used to love all sports, but I always used to love the NFL and would probably put that number one.
And so how did, with the Kings, did you have your mind set on going to Sacramento and becoming an announcer there? Like, what happened there? Because you were a Knicks fan growing up, right?
I was a Knicks fan growing up. I went to college at Bowling Green in Ohio, as you pointed out. I worked for 3 years in Illinois in a small town called Decatur on TV as a sports anchor. And I went from Decatur to Sacramento. When I went to Sacramento in 1987, I really wasn't thinking about doing the Sacramento Kings games. I was hired to be a sports director, sports anchor at a TV station in Sacramento. And I was in the right place at the right time. About 8 or 9 months after I got to Sacramento, our TV station won the rights to do the Kings games, and the Kings approved me as their announcer. And I started doing the Kings in 1988. I did the Kings all the way up until this past season, 32 years of doing the Sacramento Kings. So, I was in the right place at the right time. I was very lucky.
And you have probably the most iconic phrase in NBA history. Do you remember your first time using that?
It's a great question. I don't remember the first time. I believe it was in the early 90s, and it just came out one game, and it really caught on. People liked it. And it just started growing and growing and growing after that. And I never in my wildest dreams ever thought that it would be as popular as it turned out to be. But it proved to be like my signature phrase, and I wasn't even planning on it.
And now, after your career as the Kings announcer, do you find that you're a Kings fan or a Knicks fan still?
I don't really find myself as a fan of any team. I know that's going to be strange for people that, are in Sacramento, but I was not a Knicks fan when I was doing the Kings games. I loved the Kings. They were my second family. But I don't really consider myself a fan of any team right now. I don't even know what team I would probably watch more than any other. But I don't root for the Kings anymore. I don't root for the Knicks. I'm not really rooting for any teams. So, I do have favorite teams in football and hockey and baseball. But in basketball now, I'm kind of just, not rooting for any specific team.
And do you have like a favorite play where you're just like jumping out of your seat as an announcer?
I don't know if I have a favorite play, but doing the games when Michael Jordan was playing for the Bulls at the old Chicago Stadium, when the Bulls were winning championships, and going there was just an unbelievable experience. I mean, in 32 years, I've seen some great games. I've seen some amazing game-winning shots. I've done some phenomenal playoff games. But watching Michael Jordan play at the old Chicago Stadium in that atmosphere, that's probably the most memorable time of me announcing, NBA basketball. But I mean, I was fortunate enough when I started doing the games, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Magic Johnson and James Worthy were playing for the Lakers. Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale were playing for, the Celtics. And it was always so much fun to go to those arenas, the Forum in LA or the Boston Garden in Boston. I mean, that's when the NBA was maybe at its height, when you had the Lakers and the Celtics in the championship all the time.
Yeah, you really got to witness a good era there. Do you have like a favorite like Kings team? Maybe the early 2000s with like a Chris Webber and Mike Bibby, Peja Stojakovic, Vlade Divac, or like current teams with Swipa, Buddy Hield, all those new guys?
Yeah, I would say you hit it on the head. I think the early 2000s with Lottie and that whole team, those were great. Not only really, really good players, they were great guys. And, I was the same age as a lot of those guys. So we used to go out to dinner all the time and hang out. And they were just great people. I mean, to this day, Peja, Vlade, Hito, Scott Pollard, John Barry, those are all really good friends of mine. And those were the best days. The Kings were, a 60-win team. They were a fun bunch to watch. They were great to be around. And so I'd have to say that was probably my favorite time. My other favorite time, believe it or not, was the team when I first got to Sacramento in the late 80s with, Reggie Theis and Otis Thorpe and Joe Klein and Kenny Smith. And again, great human beings, great people. And again, I was actually the same age as the whole team pretty much. So, again, I really enjoyed those two periods. It was new to me when I first started doing the games in '88. The guys on the team were all great guys, but those early 2000s, I'd have to say those were my favorite.
And in the 80s, you witness guys like Reggie Theis who kind of set the stage for like taller point guards now, because he was obviously a lot taller than his competition at the point guard spot. Do you find that he was kind of like he kind of helped set the path along with Magic Johnson as like a way for like tall guys to come in, be point guards, be those playmakers for teams instead of having to be stuck in the post?
Well, you've got really good knowledge, because that's obviously way before you were born. And Reggie was a combo guard. And back then, really, there were no combo guards. And, other than Magic Johnson, Reggie was, the tallest, point guard in the league. So, yeah, you make a really good point. I would say they were trend setters in a way. And, Reggie could play both the point guard and the shooting guard position. Again, he was taller, as you just pointed out, than almost every point guard in the league, and that started kind of a trend heading that way. Not where everyone was as tall as Reggie or Magic Johnson, but yeah, they were very unique back then in the late '80s. There's no question about that.
And back to those early 2000 Kings era, you were part of the Kings play-by-play team when you were during the 2002 Western Conference Finals. What did you think of the reffing in that series?
Well, the Game 6 officiating to this day, even though it's 2021, is still considered the worst officiated playoff game in NBA history. Not by the people in Sacramento, but by basketball fans in general, basketball fans that had no rooting interest in either the Lakers or the Kings. There's no question that was a horrific job by the officials in Game 6. However, with that said, the Kings had Game 7 on their home floor that they had worked all year to get that home game in a deciding Game 7. And they missed 14 free throws in Game 7 and lost to the Lakers in overtime. And so, whereas Game 6, yeah, they can look at the officiating. In Game 7, they didn't get the job done. They had a chance. And again, they missed 14 free throws on their home floor in Game 7. That, to me, is the tough one to swallow.
Yeah, that is a tough one, especially after how hard they worked that season and all of that. And a quick early 2000 Kings again. What was it like watching a guy as flashy like Jason Williams play the game of basketball? Was it like anything you've ever seen before?
No, he was like basically the only other guy that I'd ever seen play like that was Pete Maravich, Pistol Pete. Jason would have you on the edge of your seat. You couldn't take your eyes off. He was kind of like, I don't know if you follow hockey, but when Wayne Gretzky played, whenever Wayne Gretzky was had the puck or around the puck, you never ever took your eyes off it because you knew something great was going to happen. That's what it was like watching Jason Williams. He made some of the most amazing plays, amazing passes, things that no one else in the NBA was doing back then. As a kid and growing up, he used to practice dribbling with gloves on, like big winter gloves. And you think about that. He learned how to dribble a basketball with big, bulky gloves on. And he was, and you should have seen him in practice. I mean, if you thought he was great in games, he did things at practice that, had everyone in awe. He was so much fun to watch.
Yeah, I've watched a lot of old games. I'd like to pride myself on being, on knowing a lot about the NBA and its past, and it's insane to me that a guy like Jason Williams could pass the ball like that and come up with so many different ways to even just be a playmaker, and he was also an amazing dribbler and shot creator as well, and he fit really well with that Kings team too. Um, and he won a championship with the Miami Heat there in Miami, which he's had a great career. Now, you watched the Klay Thompson game versus the Kings, where he anniversary was a few days ago, actually, but when he set the record for most points in a quarter, most threes in a quarter, and he had just an insane game. What was it like watching such a legendary game that broke so many records?
It was absolutely unbelievable for a guy to score 37 points in one quarter. When you're doing the game, you don't realize right away what you're witnessing because you're announcing the game and you're caught up in what's going on. And it wasn't until I want to say the second time out of the third quarter where you went to commercial and then you went, well, wait a minute. He's got what? He's made this many threes. And then in the final 3 minutes or so of the third quarter, you knew you were watching history, and you knew that again, I've been blessed to do a lot of basketball games, all right? 32 years in the NBA is a lot of games. I've watched Magic play. I've watched Michael play. I've watched Larry play. I've watched LeBron and Kobe. I've seen some amazing, amazing performances, okay? I've been very lucky. Never seen anything like that in all of my years. To think that you could watch somebody score 37 points in one quarter. Think about that. Most players in the NBA, most players that play in the NBA, both current and past, they don't even ever end up having a career high of 37 points. You won't find many people that have played in the NBA, when you look at their numbers after they retire, where they ever scored 37 points in a game. You think about this. He had 37 points in the third quarter. Still to this day, it's the most amazing thing that I've ever witnessed.
That's insane, yeah. And recently, some big news in the NBA: the Harden trade. Now, I saw your Grant's rant on this, and I'd like to for you to share your thoughts on it here, because I think it was very inappropriate the way James Harden was, because that team gave him everything. Whatever he asked for, they delivered, and he didn't deliver back to them, and he has spun it around and is making people think that the Rockets didn't do enough for him. But they threw their whole team away. They scrapped their whole team and just changed it all around, no matter what, changed play styles just to fit him, and he didn't deliver, and that's not their fault. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
I think it's just a real bad look for the league. I've lost all respect for James Harden with the way he handled himself. I thought it was as unprofessional as anything I've seen from a star in the NBA. Again, I have no respect for the guy. I've lost all respect. I think it's disgraceful. The guy's making $40 million a year. He's at a rapper's birthday party in Atlanta with no mask on right before training camp. Then he doesn't show up to training camp, leaves his new coach, Stephen Silas, out to dry, puts him in a bad position. Then, his teammates and him weren't seeing eye to eye because how could they respect a guy that's acting like that? He comes into camp out of shape and overweight. It's a bad look. Again, I lost all respect for James Harden. I've lost all respect. And I think it will be a very sad day if he ever wins a championship. And when I say a sad day, I don't think he deserves to be on a championship team. Again, he had many opportunities in Houston to get the job done, and he never played well in an elimination game. Think about this. They were up 3-2 against Golden State, lost game 6 and game 7. And Harden was terrible, couldn't shoot the ball, was awful, turned the ball over a lot. He needs to look in the mirror. Houston put very good players around him. They put a winning caliber a championship team around him, and it didn't happen. But, the way he handled himself and the way he wanted out of Houston and the way he went about it, I have absolutely zero respect for that man. Zero respect.
Another thing he did too is he showed a lot of disrespect to the team because he would be there in interviews while playing with the team, just get off like a win or a loss or something, and he's just trash talking them while he's on their roster, playing minutes. They're still trying everything that they can do to keep him because he's a great player, but honestly, at that point, if I was a GM, I wouldn't even want him because he was causing them to lose games. He was ruining their chemistry. Those guys didn't want to play with him. And now that he's gone, you've seen the emergence of guys like Christian Wood looking like the most improved player this year, All-Star. John Wall is playing at a very high level. DeMarcus Cousins has had a few games where it's looking like he might be able to bounce back and become like a solid center again. And it's just kind of tough when you have like such a good guy and he just treats his management and the team that's put everything, their heart and soul into him, and he just acts like they've done nothing. It's very immature. I think if you're making that much money, you should be grateful for the opportunities you've had. And the thing is like, you want Chris Paul. They went and got you Chris Paul. Then you decide you didn't want to play with him anymore. You don't like him. They made a trade. They traded a bunch of draft picks. They got Westbrook. Then he decided he didn't like Westbrook, so they go and make another trade. Trade for John Wall, sign DeMarcus Cousins, get Christian Wood, and then he just ups and leaves. They've changed their roster so many times. Like, even back in, 2015 when they went out and got, James Harden for him. Dwight Howard for him, not James Harden. Yeah. Dwight Howard obviously wasn't the same Dwight Howard that he was. After those injuries and his stint with the Lakers, he wasn't the same player he used to be. But he wanted Dwight. They got him Dwight. He decided he didn't like that anymore. And it was just a complete pattern of disrespect throughout his last little bit here since they lost in the playoffs. And I can't see Brooklyn really winning a championship because you can't throw a bunch of talent on a team and just expect it to work. KD, Kyrie, and James Harden are all very ball-dominant players. And their defense is a weak point. They traded away Taurean Prince, Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, all of their guys who were the least bit good at defense. They just threw them away. This team is gonna get torched up in the playoffs against a team that has good offense and good defense, like a Celtics or the Heat. Even maybe the Raptors could do something if they make the playoffs. They're not looking too good this year, but the Raptors have very solid defenders who, if are playing well, they could lock that team up and take a team with that big three in a declining team, and it could still beat that big three because of just how poor their defense is. And if you match it up with a team that has gritty defense like that, I don't see them faring well.
Well, you also have Philadelphia and Milwaukee, in addition to the other teams you mentioned. And you also have to worry about Kevin Durant. History is that when you have an Achilles, very often there's another part of your body that has had to kind of pick up the load, so to speak. And you very often will see other injuries surface. I hope not. I don't like to see anybody get hurt. But, you have to keep that in mind. Kyrie Irving is not dependable. You don't know if he's even going to be with the team. Is he going to take off? There are a lot of issues. And I'll tell you something else that, look at all the games that are being postponed now. And I think it's 22 games in the first 5 weeks have been postponed. And assuming that the NBA players are not going to be able to get vaccinated during the season, or at least for a while, I'm really wondering how the NBA is going to pull this off still. I mean, you think about this. Washington's already missed 6 games. Memphis has had 6 games postponed. They're going to have to make up these games. How are you going to make up all these games and make it fair? This is going to be a real issue for the NBA going forward. And if the COVID numbers keep going up like they are, and the NBA players are not getting in front of the line, nor should they, to get vaccinated, you're going to see a lot more postponements, in my opinion. And I'm really skeptical of how this whole thing is going to end up, and how you're going to end up playing 72 games without really extending the season for a couple of weeks to allow all the makeup games to be played. And it's going to be real challenging. It's going to be really challenging here coming up in February, and particularly February. If you think that their players aren't going to be able to get vaccinated until April, that's going to be a tough 2 months for the NBA. It really is.
And you have players who are just not taking it very seriously. Like, there are some lower level guys in this league that, their career is on the line here. Like, this could be like a season where if they don't play this season, they might never get their shot at the NBA again, or be able to, even have, a solid career. And, you have guys like James Harden and Kyrie Irving, two teammates, who are just completely ignoring all these guidelines. You see Kyrie Irving just saying that he doesn't, just not playing because he doesn't feel like it. James, they're both going out partying, all of this stuff. It's terrible, and it's a terrible look for the NBA. And the NBA isn't even cracking down on this, which I think is even worse for them, because I get it. Like, you want to see these stars play, but they need to know their place as the player, and they need to use their platform to spread, to not spread COVID.
It's really a sad look for the NBA. The NBA did. I mean, Kyrie did lose $800,000 of salary for his, absurdity. But I don't even know how to put that into perspective with how much money these guys make. What I do know is you hit it right on the head. It's a bad look for the league. There's just no other way to say it. When the stars of the league are not leading by example, if they are, doing and acting the way you should not, that's a real problem. And again, we're still in January, and I'm real skeptical of how this thing's all going to turn out. I really am.
Yeah, I just think the NBA is kind of in a downward spiral right now. And up to this point, they were the league keeping the best track of COVID and stuff like that. And then just because these guys have big names, they can just do whatever they want. I don't think that the NBA should allow them to do that, because because there are those guys on two-way contracts. They just want to get their shot at the NBA, work their way up, and those guys are just ruining that for them. Their games are postponed. Maybe their two-way contract expires and they have to go back to the G League. They don't get their NBA shot, and they're screwed. I mean, they might...
They're screwed. You make a great point. I mean, this is, for a lot of those guys, this is their moment in the sun, so to speak. And, when you have a small group of guys on a team, and that's what an NBA team is, it only takes one guy to screw everything up. It really does. And so, yeah, it's a real bad look for the league. I don't think there's any question about that.
And you think about a guy a Chris Boucher, was on a two-way contract a while ago. I've been following him since he was playing for that Raptors Summer League team when he got his two-way contract. But say, a guy like that, who's so good now, is putting up, he's a candidate for MIP this year, looking like a future defensive player of the year, and you have a guy like that, and say this COVID stuff could have happened to an up-and-coming player. Nobody knows that they're up-and-coming, but they are grinding, working hard, and then they have stars like this making it so that their games are being postponed, and then that player never gets a career, no matter how good they could have been with the right development team and the right people around them.
Well, yeah, you're right. Now, the games are still being played, which is good. And people are still, when I see people, scouts, general managers, they're still seeing, these guys. And, as long as the season is not postponed, in other words, you might have some cancellations here and there. But, hopefully a lot of these guys that you're talking about can have a full season and really showcase themselves. So, we'll see. It's not only the NBA. Baseball's talking about already delaying their season. Hockey is playing right now. It's gonna be very interesting to see if they're able to pull this off. But when you're talking about a league and a sports league, you really need all of the participants, coaches, staff, players, to really be on the same page. And if you have a couple of guys that are not on the same page, who think that, well, they're going to go out and party or they're going to do this or that, it's a real bad look for the league. It really is.
Well, it was great talking to you. Thank you for the opportunity. It was a great experience to talk to someone of your knowledge about the game of basketball itself and someone who's experienced so many things. It was a very pleasurable experience. Thank you for the opportunity. Have a good one, man.
Well, thank you. And your knowledge is really impressive. Thank you.